38, 39, respectively. They from Harlem, New York. And so they had seen everything from the BS to the sweet coming through there from their parents and their predecessors. And when it came down to the 60s, you had a generation and there was a convergence of a lot of different ideas, challenges of ideas. I think James Baldwin is from that period of birth time in the 30s, where they was like, you know, I'm gonna challenge this bullshit with a narrative that y'all haven't heard before, because movements were stifled in the past, but the movements were still there. Whether you want to talk about Reconstruction, whether you want to talk about the Black Renaissance, and before that, up in the New York area, Marcus Garvey. So movements were always coming up, but they were also all stifled and also extinguished to a certain degree because of racism, oppression, the system, and then also the passages of time. Can you really pass down what you know to fight off the radiation of racism and things like that? Can you pass it down in time? Because time works like this. A lot of times you hear people talking about, damn, we should be better right now. We should know this. No, the reason is that new generations come in and older generations die off. So that's the important thing on how to like kind of like challenge institutions and eliminate institutionalized bullshit. So the arts are very clear about taking it on and having kind of like a veil to operate until the government realizes that they could smash that veil, or they could co-opt it to do actually opposite of what it set out to do. So I'm born in 1960. My first 10 years of my life, I'm going through a 10-year period that's really has never ever been seen like 1960 to 1970, especially racially in the United States. On my birth certificate, I have Negro. By 5 or 6 years old, civil rights happens when I'm 5 years old, so-called civil rights, right? The rights for all human beings to be civil, consider themselves civilized in the United States, and also treated civil, right? So this is an act of law, and I'm in 5th grade on the edges of going into kindergarten, right? So at that time, we were calling ourselves colored. Matter of fact, me and my sister and brother, we always used to watch the TV show of our parents and say, oh, you know, they had the show called the Newlywed Game, or the Newlywed Game, and where they had, you know, the black couple once in a while would come on there, and all the other couples were white, and we always say, I hope the colored couple win. So we were clearly colored. Man, that kind of ran adjacent with what was happening in South Africa, which at that time with us could have been like on another planet. Even if you ask, you know, USAers today, and the reason I don't just call them Americans, because that's some more audacious bullshit, right, to claim all of America, right, when you the disunited states. But anyway, you know, at that time we was like, well, I hope the colors win. So we were colored. And then by the end of the 60s, we were black, and not only were we black, but black was beautiful. And you had a lot of things that actually pushed that narrative, from the Panthers to SNCC, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who everybody in the present tense tries to treat like just a dreamer and not a doer. He's actually a radical and a revolutionary, you know? So all this in my first 10 years of my life, not just my first 10 years, but also my peers. And we all moved from Queens in 1969 to Long Island, which basically was like a zoning thing of a 15-minute drive anyway, right? We gonna go to the country. And then all of a sudden after 12 minutes, we're like, oh, here we are, right? No longer New York City, now we Nassau County. But that was a town that also was the example of white flight. We moved into a house, and a lot of times people kind of have this misnomer of like saying like, oh, you grew up middle class. No, we happened to grow up with my mother and father happened to be double workers, so they had, you know, incomes from the double side. If you had single parent income, then you couldn't move up out of the city. We had double, and we hung on just for this. Because I'm like, if we middle class, every time I look in the refrigerator, we ain't got no food. Right. So we happen to have a house based on white flight. We got the house from a white family that moved out, and when we moved into Roosevelt, it was 60% white in '69, right? 75% white in '68, 30% white in '70, 15% white in '71. And they were going to other schools anyway. They wasn't going to Roosevelt High. Those are the stories you might hear from this guy named Howard Stern. He tells the story of coming from Roosevelt during that time of white flight and his family hanging on in there.
You felt like public enemy #1 at that time.
Yeah, but I was
even
also
early on.
I was also, he felt like public enemy #1 because I was incubated by a black town by the time I was 11, 12 years old, which is good and bad. So I gave a long answer to a short question of what galvanized me. It was a sum of many parts. And when we said we were black and it was beautiful, that was the cultural narrative by the end of the '60s. And let me tell you, it didn't start from culture. It was galvanized by culture. James Brown had made one song that even made white kids say say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. They were like, look, how the hell are white kids up there saying, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud? Well, J. Edgar Hoover was still in the government at that time. He said, this is a fucking problem. This is the first 10 years of my life, so you don't really need a lot of outside. And then you had a community that really seriously was running their mouth, and you had Panthers here, Nation of Islam. You had every campus had radical leaders, whether they was black, white, green, or purple. They were very forward in the trying to say, we're gonna get away from the status quo. They put pressure on the so-called white kids. The reason I say so-called white kids, because this is the racial narrative that they pimp the United States of America out, that one drop bullshit that don't apply nowhere else in the world. Right. But it applies in other different ways. But so the so-called white kids at the time, they were radical when trying to make a change. They put pressure on them like, well, you're gonna be radical, but you're gonna be broke and dead with them niggas. Mm-hmm. So that's why a lot of them moved on out of that and said, you know what, I'll become less of a radical because I do want a house and my kids are hungry. So I will say, Mom and Dad, I love you again. Right. AKA Patty Hearst. But anyway. So the end of that narrative, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, made us black at the end of the '60s. But my personal conversation with Kwame Ture, AKA Stokely Carmichael, said, man, he said, yeah, he made that song, but trust me, the movement of artists and culture came out of the movement of real people doing real things. Right. He said, we were on James Brown's ass every day. Damn right he came up with it at the end of the '60s, because we was on his ass in the middle of the '60s. And so the movement did not start from the culture. The movement started from the people who then said the culture had to reflect that. I mean, all art is short for artificial. It's not real. It's a facsimile of real life. It's a reflection of real life, and it could galvanize it, but we're in different times now where now it can reflect and then dictate, because it can dictate real life if you ain't got yourself. So then you're looking for answers from culture, which is totally the reverse of how it used to be.
So this conversation about like history and the roots of movements, I think is really important and something we aren't necessarily engaging and talking about around the criminal justice system and the history of the struggle against the creation of the system and now the destruction of lives that the system is causing. And your music has tracked that trajectory of the problems with the criminal justice system. What would you say is the most pressing issue, or how have things changed in your mind with the criminal justice system, and what can we all do as artists and activists and lawyers in this room to attack the issues?
Art must always follow astute people. Astute people do research, they're diligent, Not saying that what they have might be always the right information, but it ain't freestyling off the top of your head based on how you fucking feel. Government, I mean, government it ain't a joyride. It needs people that dot the I's and cross the T, and it's thankless. It's thankless when it comes down to government and say, well, how do you house the people, how do you feed the people, and how you govern the people so when something doesn't go amok and you just watching it thinking the people are gonna take care of it. People need protection. I mean, look, like right now, I'm ill-equipped, seriously, at my age and stage as a triple OG, right, to really have a comment, not emotionally, about what happened to Nipsey Hussle in the hood. I'm not equipped to give that answer right now, because I could be a little bit of vigilante-ish, and that necessarily is not the right conversation to have when the government is responsible down into the cracks. You know what I'm saying? But you got to come up with some kind of real practicality is a motherfucker. You got to understand, you got to be practical. Somebody rob your mom, and you got to figure that out. You know, you can't like, you know, I'm about to get this motherfucker back in a vendetta. Nope, you're not that cat. You ain't living that life. You know what I'm saying? Somebody's got to come to your service and aid. And there's got to be some situation in your community that governs itself. The black community has never been able to govern itself. It's been in a plantation since 1865. You know, plantation state is when you don't have control of economics, your economics, your education, or your enforcement, or your environment. That means you're asking for help and you're asking for somebody to do all those things for you. So we're never ever, we're not governing ourselves. We're always being policed. Like it's an overseer looking over you. Now it's in all facets of life. And that's why you want to rely on astute people. We don't need hip academics. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's the flyest motherfucking academic nigga. You know, it's like, we don't need that. We know it's a dance, and it's even a bigger dance in 2019 because images and all these things are out there in the water. And they could kind of like steer people this way or that way based on a picture or whatever. So we got to dance. We got to appear, because that's the language we got to come up with. But right now, I don't even have the language to say, what happens to this dude that shot Nipsey on some, on some jealous shit, right? It's like, you know what? I got to let time fly, and I got to say it's good to celebrate the transition, but we have to be mad at the inability to stop bullshit amongst ourselves, and it's got to be a cutoff point going into this decade of so-called clarity of 2020. There's going to be a lot of social cataracts in that decade, y'all. So I'm saying, the point I'm saying, when it comes down to prison industrial complex, which is a machine that I necessarily don't understand how we go from 100,000 black men in 1970 to the numbers that we have now. I do understand, I've done some of the research, but we seriously need to not look down on educators and academics as just being, oh yeah, they took, yeah, all right, nobody really trying to hear them like that, so we're gonna listen to Rihanna today. It's like, nah, man, nah. It's like, but they have to be able to be given a bold platform and throne to issue out what they do as a talking head. So sometimes it disturbs me when I look on the quote-unquote news programs and you see 4 talking heads up there all screaming at each other, and every single one of these people are equipped and educated, but they don't have the time to get out a narrative. So they gotta actually come like an entertainer and spit out the sound bites. And so you got generations who are just like hogs in a trough, just gobbling up sound bites and acting upon them. Meanwhile, all this bullshit that's going on now in this government and these systems going on, because they know in this time and place in this century that all they have to do is throw 3 books of words at people and they will be distracted, and that's just too deep for me. And you're gonna leave it up to somebody else to do the battles. And the people that you put up in the wars are outnumbered. And then they stressed out. You goddamn right they smoking blunts, man, at 7 fucking o'clock p.m. after their hard-ass, thankless job that nobody really gives a damn about. So we need people that say, I'm trying to be a lawyer, and I'm tired of you disrespecting my tenure and my resume just because you think that your life is about fun and games and popcorn. But at the end of that spectrum is somebody that will put your whole family in fucking jail and probably a wrist switch from throwing gas up in there as new gas chambers. So don't think we can't be disposable by a flip of a wrist in the law. You know, Twitter's the only social media I do. I have a rule. Over 50 years old, just concentrate on one. I do Twitter. My daughter runs the Instagram. She runs the Snapchat. She does everything. She handles all that. Matter of fact, I'm very astute technically. I'm astute technically. Excuse me? What up, daughters? Oh yeah, right, exactly. I'm very astute technically, but with her, I increasingly play dumb and I play my age. And excuse me, sir?
A wise man knows when to be quiet.
You goddamn right, especially against millennials, because I say old heads, you will not win against a millennial talking about the future. Now, a young person won't win talking to an old head about the past. But in the present, both of y'all better pay fucking attention. That's for real. So, yep, I hear you.
You're feeling us.
So I mean, that where we're at right now, I'm saying, when people ask me, right, there's violence in that bark. When people ask me exactly what we should do, you don't need a soundbite. The best that ever did it in a soundbite way, being concise, intelligent, and also speaking to a broad audience was President Barack Obama. He was just like, and a lot of times when President Obama came into office, and when people were like kind of throwing up confetti and going like this and getting their dance on, I mean, you know, that's acceptable because they do it in every country, you know? Not everybody, because some people will always know, yeah, y'all dance all you want, the real shit is coming down now. But I knew that, I looked at it like a hourglass. I said, shit, we got 4 years to get shit together, some shit together. We got 4 years, or maybe we have 8. But now it's the sting, get your shit together, because when he leave, it's gonna be even a bigger mess. And we lucky we got 8. A lot of times I was like, man, so people like that, intelligentsia is very important. Now we know some intelligentsia is just like, well, fuck it, I'm intelligent, but I want to be rich too. I want these things. I don't want like, little Nas X to have more shit than me. And all he did was a half country song, and I went to law school for 30 years, man. And this dude's driving a Bugatti, and I still got my Toyota Corolla, but you know.
Highlander hybrid.
That's my car.
Right. I got an Acura. I'm saying, but you gotta kind of hone into like, this is my purpose, this is my job. It got nothing to do with the perks or the toys. This is my purpose, my job. And if you don't like your job, you don't like your purpose, you should really exit it. But also what you know, see that back in the day, if you didn't like your job or your purpose, then you would find a apprentice and teach them, and then you exit out. It's like, look, somebody got to know what I know. So here, yo, boom, I'm gonna bestow it upon you. This is gonna be your duty. You got that energy, you 25, I'm 41, I'm checking out. The problem is sometimes when people check out, they take everything that they learn with them, and they end up just being a painter. But that's cool too, because I'm a painter too, but I grew up with the arts, and the arts happen to be my vehicle to be able to take everything that we do, whether it's visually or audibly, and knock it into a soundbite. But that's entertainment, people. Entertainment, you gotta fill your words up with something, or you ain't gotta fill it up with anything. But the entertainment value is to knock whatever is in life down to and truncate it into a soundbite or a visionary thing where you say, oh, I get that piece of visionary art. I get that. And it's a painting that tells, 1,000 or 1,000,000 words, especially in the days of Instagram. Now a picture could tell 1,000,000 words. So that's entertainment. This is not necessarily it shouldn't be a national initiative for people that run systems to actually be fly and entertaining as they do it. It's a lot of boring work, but there's people that come up and say, you know, I'm meant to do that. Like when you look at politicians in this country, why do politicians gotta, you know, I ain't seen a bald politician in a long time. I mean a white bald politician. You know, brothers got, you know, because Michael Jordan changed all that. In the 70s, it was Isaac Hayes and Michael Jordan, so brothers just cut their shit off and be like, all right, you know. But, you know, usually, you know, the white politician males have to get the comb over. They can't show much gray, or it's got to be, the look got to be right. So, you know, they're still on that Kennedy shit. So that's the reason why we got to vote for somebody that looks the part. And then Donald Trump comes in, right? And so it really gets crazy. So, I mean, there's a guy that really seriously is bald, and what the fuck you got that shit on top of your head for?
The rule book is out.
So this is what I'm saying, and the systems, I'm saying something really important here. These are the generations that are accustomed to getting things thrown at them like that, and when it comes down to policy and real shit like, you know, voting, you know, the narrative about voting. We can't have the street narrative about voting. We understand where it comes from because voting, you ask the streets, they're like, man, that shit ain't shit, you know, but, okay, but who was the judge that locked your ass up? Who voted this dude in? You know, voting in this country is as essential as washing your ass in the morning. Now, you ain't got to wash. Look, there is no requirement as an adult to wash your ass or brush your teeth. You could just go, yo, man, I woke up and I'm just up. But you can't run around saying shit stink either. So it's just something that you gotta do. You ain't got, and don't get caught up into the ESPN version of the presidential election. Right. You know, you gotta figure out, voting starts with your understanding like, man, who zoned this block? Who named this damn block? Why is Slauson? Why is Crenshaw? You see this whole thing of this street cred being pushed into the, and once again I'm gonna use that word, narrative of the United States of America, where people feel I gotta have some street cred to communicate. Don't give too much credit to the goddamn streets. People are on the streets. Who's running the streets gotta be the question. Who is zoning the streets? Who's coming up with the rules for the streets? The law for the street that you own. Just in it don't mean a damn thing. You're gonna be in it, gonna live in it, or survive in it and die in it. Being on the street ain't enough. You don't want to be on the street. What the people want is like, how do I live on the street? How do I have ownership on the street? How do I build some of these buildings on the street that my family own that I could pass on down? Right. Not be on the goddamn street. You don't want to check from the goddamn street. But they are in the news today, everything is put out like, oh yeah, get this street cred. Go get this street cred. This street cred to save you. This street cred, that's some bullshit, I'm telling you, man. I'm from New York, man. I'm telling you straight up and down. And you know how biased New Yorkers are. New Yorkers, like everywhere else in the country, everywhere else in the country is country. They'll look at a person from LA and say, yeah, they might be a city out there, but why they talk like that? They talk like they from Louisiana, man. New Yorkers they were like this. And you know what? And it would take a New Yorker to tell another New Yorker that they country and ain't as city as they think they are. So this whole thing about the street cred is already pushed to so many people to steer them away from being educated, to steer them away from having 3 or 4 different languages to talk in the United States, as opposed to like, yeah, you got to come like this, son, for real. It's like, wow, so now valedictorians is trying to like be all slanted out. The worst thing I know is like, you know, seeing somebody, like for example, slang is not something that you mimic from somebody else. Slang is something that's inherent. You could say cool and it's just be cool. It's like, yeah, done. It's like, done? You listen to too much old Mobb Deep records, man. You don't even know how this started, man. The dude wanted to say son. Prodigy wanted to say son, said done. They said, yo, keep it on the tape. So now it's slang. It's like, no. So this whole hip street cred shit, I go and dismember it. Now, I don't want to dismember people and their feelings and their attachment to the reflections of art because it gives them a GPS of what's going on, and it gives them a language to understand. But do not diminish your education, and that's what we need. A long answer to that short question. That's what we need when we come down to asking questions about what we should do now. You cannot disengage from people that put in the work to do research and come up with studies. Not to say they just came up with the research and the studies. What we're going to do with it comes from a community effort. You know, there's a difference between doers and thinkers. Usually thinkers are introverted, they're going to think, they stay in their little cubicle. Even though now this is even a different zone right now. You also got to pay attention to the context of the time and the year and the space. Mm-hmm. Now the introverted thinker who stays in the basement, now they could be a keyboard thug too. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? You see them on social media, yo, when I get there, man, I'm gonna blast the whole fucking gymnasium and shit like that. And then in their reality, they sitting in their basement with wires in their head, you know, in front of their laptop or phone or whatever. So we have to pay attention, since everybody's connected, you know, lining up with real people doing real things. And understand you got to take the heat, because there's going to be criticism all the time, especially since people are connected. So they might not like this or like that or like this law and all that, but somebody's got to be able to interpret that. Yeah. And literacy in society is very important. Literacy in the law is important. And not everybody's going to be feeling that. But if you know LeBron James' latest 10-game stats and you don't know the stats that's affecting your block, and you 38 years old, then somebody else got to do it, and you can't cry about it for not knowing, you know? So.
So I just have one more question before I turn it over to Alicia and then open it up. And I just, one of the greatest movies of all time, 1989, Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee. Your music was featured prominently throughout the movie. And I remember just being a kid, my family coming from Trinidad to Flatbush, like that movie meant everything. You know what I'm saying? Just to see your neighborhoods and everything. There's this particular scene, though, where Radio Raheem, one of the key figures in the film, shows his knuckle rings. And on one hand, he has love. And on the other hand, he has hate, and gives this brilliant soliloquy, right, about the tension, about this being what, life is about. The Cuban revolutionary Che Guevara says a true revolutionary is motivated by feelings of love, right? We're so often blamed for hating this group or hating that group. No, we hate oppression and injustice. We're trying to overthrow that, and because we love our people. And at the same time, I have to bring to the conversation the deep anger, the deep rage, prophets of rage, right? We think about, we took, this festival for the first 2 days took folks into 2 different correctional facilities to see young folks, our children, our babies, locked up in shackles and chains. Like we just came off the slave ship, we still on the plantation. And that's a lot of trauma that they're experiencing on a daily basis, that our folks that went in experiencing that trauma. You come out, you got to be angry. If you ain't breathing, you have no nerves in your body if you're not feeling a little angry, upset about that. And you have in your career done a brilliant job of channeling the anger that you and that the community's been feeling into this incredibly productive outlet, into being a voice for folks who have felt voiceless, and to creating an international consciousness about that anger and that pain. So I just want to ask you to share your thoughts on how we can think about that anger, that pain, that rage that we feel when we look at the conditions that our communities are in.
Well, when we met Brian for the first time, we was at Mr. Harry Belafonte's Sankofa meeting. And Harry Belafonte is very clear in saying that his inspiration Paul Robeson. So when we have a conversation with Harry Belafonte, we having a conversation with Paul Robeson, and his influences are coming in. So that electric, or I should say that digital cord is connecting us, man. It's just that older people transition on, and younger ones up like us have to be able to pick up the mantle, and then we have to inspire people in our vein, you in the arts and academia and stuff like that, me in academia and the arts or whatever, and say, well, what other person can carry this on? And I felt that was a purpose for me to say, yeah, it can't be about me, it got to be about we. Because the conditions are not singular. they're plural. You know, it's like conditions. So you need peoples to kind of like confront these conditions. But you got to have everybody also knowing, like, okay, these are the options for peoples to confront some of the conditions. And you can't, you know, you can't get a helicopter drop off at Mount Everest. You know what I'm saying? It's like, excuse me?
Or San Quentin.
Yeah, right. It looks like Mount Everest on how to chip the mountain down. So it's seriously a community of each one teach one. But systematically, the community has never seriously been a community that could stand and be on its own 2 feet. So we got to fight for that. We got to fight for that. It's a plantation. It's a plantation state more than ever. And sometimes when I get on online, here's another thing. I don't bug out online because how you going to bug out a person you don't know from a can of paint or a box of crayons anyway? But you put it out there, and some people, oh man, you're talking so, you know, just like it ain't all about that and all about that. Not that I'm paying them no mind anyway, but it's good to hear what's out there, and it's good to be able to approach some things with some solutions. Tell people, like, look, it's got to be a total effort. If you can't change your head and change your mind, how you going to change your block? If you can't change your block, how you going to change your town? You can't change the town, how you going to change, you know, the state or the region you live in? You can't stay, you know, so this whole, we're going to change the world. That's a little bit of a big sentence, change the world, especially you ain't been to the world, so how you going to change the world? We got the World Wide Web in our pocket. I'll be practical. We got a device in our pockets, right? For good, bad, evil, or whatever. It is incumbent upon you lock into the www, which means the World Wide Web. You are connected to the entire world regardless. Now, you can look in your pocket and say this is a toy or it's a tool. A lot of people like to use it as toys. But as a tools, at least you can understand or be able to get a facsimile of an understanding of somebody else dealing with a situation that even be more dire than yours, or already came up with some kind of situation or solution that your community could use. The isolated box of the United States of America is a prison cell for black people if we don't connect to the diaspora. It's a prison cell for black and brown and people of color if we don't connect to the diaspora of the rest of the planet. This is one country out of 215. If you believe, like, oh yeah, I'm American, I'm like, well, where do you want to start? Where do you want to start with that? You know, you're American and you ain't left America because America forever. I'm like, that sounds like a pep rally for a corrupt high school, you know? So to change the world, what do we do to change the world? Let's start to get people to change their minds. Let's get people to try to change your block. You know, as you know, in Brooklyn, right, where you grew up, you know some blocks are better than others. And you go to one block, like, nah, don't do that on that block. Nah. Oh, you could probably do on that block, and that block ain't got no leadership. But that block right there, you go up there with that, it's a problem. And it'd be like 3 blocks apart. These things are instrumental for communities to look at, to say, how do we find and make each one of these small parts better as a sum of a bigger part to try to come up with, once again, a conversation narrative on how other people could follow. But also you got to know your enemy. Your enemies don't want that. And your enemies are situations or people and human beings who are embedded into systems that benefit them at the expense of others. The prison industrial complex, they, oh yeah, we need the prisons because of crime. They're not even getting into the detail of what it is. All this talk about, yeah, we need to, I don't like the separation of human beings, number one, and I don't like the separation of black and brown in this country because this thing's happening right on the line that are reminiscent of Nazi Germany, right? And what I was saying is that when you get online and I tell people, I said, you need to study Nazi Germany from 1928 to 1933. Oh, what do you mean? This ain't that, and this ain't that. It's like, not that I'm paying them no damn mind anyway. I said what I said. And I said, when you study, and I've been to Germany so many times and talked to people who were in camps, and talked to people before they died off. Because when I first went to Germany, it was 87. I go to, you know, Germany. We had to go to, we only could go to West Germany, but when we played Berlin, you got to get on a bus and go through on one road through East Germany to get to Berlin, which is split in half to East Germany and West Germany. Public Enemy had fans on the East German side of Berlin who listened to the radio stations, but they couldn't get over the wall. They had military guards at the wall. So Public Enemy, in all my travels to our 112 countries, I just didn't go to see, okay, so we could get to the hotel and order food. I was very cognizant of where I was going, where I was at, who I was speaking to, how to align different struggles and stories with stories that we have from the United States of America, growing up in a patch of the Northeast in a place called New York, and going around, going to Brazil, and knowing that they were split up into 8 different racial categories. And I'm saying, wow, and going in and telling, y'all all black. No, we're not all black because they're and then going with the power of rap music because it was able to go there and be like, oh yeah, we get it now. And Public Enemy has started cultural revolutions via rap music in all these places. Now, okay, don't hang your hat on it because culture moves and culture turns into something else and another phase comes in. But during our time, we laid it down and those seeds sprouted into gigantic trees that also planted, you know, had fruit, bore fruit and also seeds of its own. So in the United States, it's very important for the system to not water the seeds but pour gasoline on them. And then maybe set them afire and then make the fire also eat itself. So if anybody is kind of like, you gotta kind of really like pick through it like, I don't know if y'all eat catfish or not or whatever. Right, there you go. You gotta kind of like pick through what's edible and then throw the bones away. Some people might say none of it's edible. Some people say, yo, I gotta eat it because I'm starving and I'm hungry, so I'm gonna eat it, but I'm gonna throw the bones away. The same thing you gotta do with information, especially in the digital age. You gotta pick what's applicable and throw it away because we're in a disinformation age too. But most people are not net literate. They're not digitally literate. So people are used to being told as opposed to going and being forensic into what's coming at them. Not everybody has that ability. We're not trained in this country to have that ability, but other places in the world, they have that ability where you just can't throw shit at them and they're gonna catch it like, yeah, we believe that. No, they're gonna be like, you know. Excuse me, sir?
We're conditioned not to do that. Learned behavior.
We're conditioned, exactly. And then we got 2 generations that's ready on the bricks right now. Are they conditioned? They're conditioned from the womb damn near. So those conditionings is different. Like when I was coming up in the 60s and the 70s, there was remnants of people that was like, man, I mean, look, I'm gonna give you a case in point. I come from a square mile town of Roosevelt, Long Island, right? There were people in my community, right, who 20 years old ride a bike. I don't see how they did it because this is a miracle. They riding a Stingray backwards, right, holding a record player. I'm like, with no hands. It's like, you know, riding a Stingray backwards, 20 years old. Trust me, man. If you go up there, it's like, yo, man, you couldn't buy them. Because they would say, this is a miracle today, but it's happening to it. They would say things like, I want your fucking money. It wasn't about money with them. They had themselves, their jewelry, they would go and make a fork in metal class and make a fork, and it'd be their bracelet. These women, you couldn't buy them. They were just like, yo, they were set in their ways, and that's how they was gonna be. And the way that the government split that up, they found narcotics. The first wave of narcotics that they really zoomed in was during the 40s in Harlem because it was just too much of a togetherness going on, and they went through the jazz artists because they knew people followed jazz. So they went and got all the jazz cats, you know, on smack and stuff like back in the day. So then they made it hip to be fucked up on drugs.
Early Malcolm.
Huh? Early Malcolm, right. If you want to be like a jazz cat, boom, you got to get some heroin. Yo, all that shit was premeditated. The next movements that come up, they figure out, you know, we can't have these people come together throw them something that they get them distorted, arguing with each other, separated, and then it will manifest upon itself. So these movements have been disrupted for a whole bunch of different reasons that it's too long for me to be talking. But there's a lot of generations that won't know this information, and they'll be relying on us to tell our story from 2009. 2009 is not enough to tell somebody how to be what they got to be in 2027. And when I was growing up, right, I kind of knew stories from 1943. I'm born in 1960. That's 17 years before me. Well, just think right now, what's 17 years before us right now? It's even still over the 2,000 year mark, right? When you talk about Public Enemy, that's like, man, it's like the Renaissance period. I mean, really, seriously. It's like, I was born in 1960, it would be like talking about County Cullen, you know, Marcus Garvey, you know what I'm saying? And by the 60s, you already have movements in the 50s that people locked into, so you had to listen to the movements of the 60s or the 40s and the 50s instead of going way back to Marcus Garvey. So this is why sometimes like, oh, yeah, the Public Enemy is going to speak. And you talking to somebody who's like 17 years old, right? Yo, man, it's like, man, they need upgraded, updated, relevant situations on the regular to the point that they're tired of hearing it. And if this was a true education system, and because, you know, education is to me, is the thing that also, it saves you from an enforcement. It makes you look at the environment different, you know? And of course, damn sure it makes you understand economics, right? Education, if it was revamped with culture, and not just national culture, because this is like Hostess Twinkie shit here. Excuse me?
You're not talking about
I'm talking about all education, and especially, yeah, but public education. I mean, I'm talking about public education as far as, just to be short term on it, a kid going to like 5th grade. If they don't have the arts integrated into the school systems, they will never learn what's going to come up in the next 30 years.
That's right.
Because let me tell you, this is the strength of the arts, right? I'm not in public policy or government policy and stuff like that. My research is in the arts and as artists, worldwide and in of this country. I teach the arts. Through the arts, you can weave everything through it, but it's sort of like, it's water, right? There's a reason why the education of blacks in the arts is powerful, because as a disenfranchised or separated people, all you had was the expression of code. And code was everything, whether it was like this, right? Now that's something that you can hear. But code is almost like, you know, that look like. You can't put that in, you can't write that down like, right? You walk by somebody, right? Right? It could either be like this or that. It could start a fight, it could get your ass kicked, or it could be like, yo, this props. There is no way that you can write that down. And in this country, this so-called white institutionalized system narrative, there's all kinds of, they're trying to figure it out and research it down to the point where Justin Timberlake will have the final say-so on all this shit, right? But it ain't Michael Jackson's dance and shit. It's all this other shit that goes with it, these nuances that you could never, ever get because they verbally can't get transferred or how much they mean. That's why I said when I go down to Brazil, I can't speak the language, right? Can't speak the language. Damn sure, I mean, but I damn sure don't know how to speak English right. So, you know, we speak American here, right? USA-er, right? Go down there, there's nuances there in that situation that you can only feel and you cannot even interpret it. And these are the things that have to kind of like get illuminated when you're in a school system that could end up teaching. You got to teach culture, and not for a manipulative way, not for a way where it's an advantage for a corporation and a disadvantage for people. You know, the problem is with culture in this country, it's sold and it's marketed and the pressure is on for culture to sell. Culture has to be given. It can't be like, it's not, this whole thing of like, at the end of the day, who's going to have a say-so on culture is going to be Apple Music. It's going to, back in the day, it's going to be Sony. Because this code of black folks especially, and the reason I say black folks was like, y'all niggas don't say nothing. Niggas don't say nothing. Don't say a goddamn thing. We had to find a way to So this was the way for hundreds of years of code. You just couldn't say, I'm going to kick this cracker and kill this cracker's ass. We didn't have that Nat Turner outward narrative. There was always an inner Nat Turner burning and people that said, Like Fiddler on the old roots, on the first roots, said, when he said, I'm fit to play me something that I want to play. You can't write that. All you have to say is like, I get what you mean, dog. I get what you mean. And this is the conversation that's undercurrent, is under the United States of America. So this is why black culture was so important, because don't say nothing. All the other cultures were appropriated and visited and mixed up. Like you go down to Mexico, or I should say, that part of the Americas, which our people have pyramids down there, right? And they introduced instruments that came from Europe for various bunch of reasons, which is in mariachi today. Culture brings all us human beings together for our similarities and knocks aside the differences. This is why it has to be given fairly in school systems from 0 to 12. You'll have a lot of people that's wide open, and they wouldn't let a corporation have the final say-so. And when a corporation has a say-so on a culture, especially now, they could steer you anywhere. They could take you anywhere. They'd be like, yeah, all right, we'll get this person to represent this, and they'll believe that tomorrow. They'll believe this tomorrow. Now culture is not just only audible, but it's visual, it's also in style, and it's also in story. And if they're steering these 4 areas of culture, they can take the masses and turn the masses into them asses. They just move the M over. See, I'm a wordsmith. Some of y'all will get this tomorrow.
We've heard it.
So I would say like this. Yeah, but I'm only a lyricist in this language, so I'm lacking. I think if I was a lyricist in other languages, I'd be dead now, because I'd be oh yeah, I'm in the middle of like, I'm in the mix in Namibia, and like, oh, I just said the wrong shit. When you go to different places in the world, listen, you go to different places on this planet, you will find government fuckery that you will just be like, okay, now how do we go around this? Look, how many of y'all smoke weed? Don't be all nice and polite right now. It's legal in this state. You know, as soon as you get to the Taiwan airport, they got a sign on this. Any contraband drugs brought into this country, penalty, death. They let you know as soon as you come in the airport. One seed, your ass, they're going to give you a poke chop. You know what a poke chop is? Poke you with that sword and chop that head off. You go, hey, try to take a seed into Dubai. So the world is just like the jungle. The jungle is got its own thing going on, like the poacher that was in, the poacher that was out there in the jungle and in the lions, and so you just got to be literate at all times and aware and awake, and also you want to be glued to people who are aware and awake, and don't short play them, don't undertake them as being unimportant. It's always important for smart people to be in the room. That's practical, right? Mm-hmm. Smart people ain't got to be hip. All they got to do is be smart. So all this talk about like everybody got to be hip and have street cred and be fly and not boring, that's some, let me use my 13th curse here. That's some bullshit, right? Nobody want a dumb motherfucker behind the wheel of the car. But then all of a sudden, let me tell you, gun culture has silenced intelligentsia for the last 50 years. When I was growing up, and even you in Brooklyn, although they have more than in Long Island and Queens, whatever, guns wasn't prevalent. Right. You couldn't find a gun. A gun had to be hidden. And if one dude had a gun, that shit was on a low. All of a sudden, 78, 79 kept coming around. It was right on the edges of R&B. That's Reagan and Bush, right? 1980. I was 20 years old in 1980. Let me tell you, 78, 79, the drug war started happening up in New York, the Nicky Barnes and all them, right? And all of a sudden, it was just like, it went from weed in 74, 75, which was kind of like people would docile, they stressed out, do some weed, boom, boom, boom. The Jamaicans always have weed, so people like, I don't know, the Rastafarians, you got to smoke that shit in a big paper bag and shit, whatever. So the shit was around, right? It wasn't a trade or industry. Few cats had it. So, whatever. 76, 77 rolls around in New York City. The reason I say New York City, it's New York City and it's Los Angeles. You already know the story with L.A., with the Rick Ross and all that, the original Rick, not Rose, right? You already know that story, or how that shit happened out here. New York's the other side. That's the other test market. You messing around with 10 million people, right? You got a lot of people to play around with for industry and drugs, right? Mob is there in the whole nine. All of a sudden, cocaine comes into play. Cocaine in the marketplace. Cocaine to new teenagers. Cocaine coming through disco. It's like cocaine coming through the clubs. The clubs are new. People start integrating the clubs. You get white. Cocaine is a white, elite, posh drug at first. That's what a dealer does. He's like, I'm gonna give you a little bit for free. They started giving it out to cats for free. Cats were looking for weed. It's like, I'm looking for weed, man. Said, nah, man, I got this thing. I ain't doing no cocaine, because cocaine had a bad connotation with what? Superfly and all that stuff. They were like, man, I ain't trying to get up in that wild shit. I'm just trying to get weed. There was no weed. They cleared all the weed off the fucking streets. By 78, 79, cocaine was in high spots, right? Made it breakdown accessible on the streets by 78. 78, gonna turn into 79, you could get cocaine on the streets, right? They would go to the dealers in 77 and say, man, I want some weed. I got no weed, take this. They got the freebies. By 78, they were buying it. By 79, it's like, yo, man, I got to get my money up. I want some cocaine in the club. I can't get weed or whatever. Or they already hooked. Right. So weed is like, I want to get that. 80s come around, right? And at that same time, what comes in? You have the cocaine wars, Nicky Barnes, the streets is hot, right? Streets is lit like crazy. Then all of a sudden I start finding, even in my town, so-and-so got shot. Like, so-and-so got, how they get a gun? Stu got shot. 78 to 79, 79, it was like 13 murders in my town. Where the fuck they get the guns? You got the cocaine, you got the guns. By 80, 81, they found a way to freebase the cocaine into a thing called crack by 82, 83. The reason I know, we were running clubs then. We were DJs in the clubs. We all happy thinking it's just about our music. Cats staying at 5:30, we'll play some more music, not even blinking and shit. That's the monster. They not blinking. So they looking at you like, yeah, son, I want to, like, you'll keep playing that music, right? It's like, blink, dude, blink. or here's the park, 4:15, you getting out of the club, right? 4:15 a.m., they playing ball. But not only just playing ball, right? Pitch black, dark park, right? Dude playing like Dennis Rodman type defense. Got to get the monkey out their blood, man, for another hit. This is by 83, 84. I know because we run in the clubs. I ain't no kid. I'm 23, 24. I see shit. I'm educated.
And I got my daddy and my mama and everybody.
Out here, what, Richmond?
Yeah, the Bay Area.
Yeah, because that's the next spot after L.A. Straight up, boom. But you know what? The government was compliant in all this stuff. It's a case study. It's tons of information that could fill this room. You need smart people to go through it, break it down, and then you need people to say, okay, that happened then. It wiped out a couple generations. What do we do now to go forward? You got to keep telling the nightmare stories. You got to tell the good tales, and you got to give somebody who's 14 years old a picture, especially it's even harder now, because although that information is in their phone, you got to redirect their attention span because they're going to fall victim to new games. Right. And new games of COINTELPRO is in perpetuity in this country. It wasn't a style. It's always in effect. It's #1 at the chart at the hit charts. #1 at the hit charts as far as this system is concerned. It's not an individual. It's a system. It's a what do you call it? An organism of its own. It's Godzilla, goddamnzilla, or whatever the hell. And if you don't attack institutions with an army of intellectuals, artists, policymakers, people in the neighborhood, you got to get them on a page that attacks this thing that works 25 hours a day and 8 days a week. So that's my artist perspective of all the questions y'all asking about what should we do.
I think that's a fantastic way to end. Yes. Thank you so much. Let's give him another round of applause.
Well, now don't clap for me. Just clap for yourself because this is one of those things where I'm passing through life. There ain't gonna be the shorter days are ahead of me than behind me. And I ain't hanging my hat on accomplishments either. It's like, boom, this is what it is, and this is further what's in store in front of us. It truly is a each one, teach one type of situation. And it ain't the Olympics. It ain't this is an area of the world that could find ways to complement like the people on this stage better than what they're doing. And it could find ways to complement your efforts better than what it's doing. They've already come up with, oh yeah, we got an award show for entertainment. I mean, like, entertainers don't need a fucking more thing of accolade. Basketball players don't need a fucking more bit of attention than they're getting, man. ESPN got 8 channels and shit that not know what they're doing with to talk about, how LeBron Wade feels today. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and then you got people who are hurt and messed up if they don't know the actual fact about sports. But people love the arts. They don't really know about the arts like they should. People say, well, I live in a system in society. They don't really know about society. They just wait till it's delivered and given to them. So it's work to do, but work is life, and life should be work. And you got to live your life. And, all the people that might say, yeah, man, I'm about the movement, about the cause, man. 24 hours a day, dog, for real? I don't know about that. You got to eat. And your kid might not be into anything that you're into. Be like, yo, all they about you, but they ain't into what you into. So you want to pass off a little bit of that, and because it's going to be their world. It ain't our damn world. It ain't my world at all. Matter of fact, I'm being pushed off to the pasture like, it's like, all right. And a lot of times people think that they know me too. Let's get Chuck D to talk. I said, nah, you don't. Let's just watch the game. Try to pick out who's gonna win the East versus the West. You know what? Because you don't want it. And so people like, oh man, I think Chuck could get more radical. I said, man, you have no fucking idea. And the reason I say this, that the amount of people that I've sat with and had one-on-one conversations with, you can't tell me a motherfucking thing about what I've heard about me at all, because I've taken all that in consideration as a listener. And I'm not going to be the one that's going to tell anybody what to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of what I know. I'm going to always continue to make art. If you want to go into my catalog, you'll see exactly what I mean. Yes, a big part of my life is in words that I've written. Big part of my life is in the arts that I've done. But that ain't my life. Ain't my life. I ain't operating every minute of the day like, oh, now I got to write a song out of this and then see if it could go #1 so I could be on the American Music Awards. Nah, man. But I think my area is the arts. And I think the arts could actually be taught better. I think the arts could be given. I think the arts could actually illuminate and steer people in the right direction and give people the proper props. See, it's up for artists and entertainers to give real people props, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. We have to reflect the people and give the people props and find a person. You know, that's why, you know, and people like Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash would write a song about a person he knew who actually, you know, cooking in a diner and the struggle they had. That's Johnny Cash talking about a person in regular life. It's not about always the other way, like this is me and what I'm rolling through and I'm flying like this and all that, and people looking up there. It's important for artists to look downward and bring people up instead of people looking at artists to push them further up.
Yes,
So that's my belief.
thank you.
Give it up for Chuck D one more time,
Give it
y'all.
up, give it up.
Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Two more things, because I got to head to the airport too later, but two more things. If you want to check out two things I'm doing with my career that I have the most fun with, and other than my daughter always running me and telling me exactly how we should do it, and she's totally right, and I love her, and she is my other half of the brain as far as going forward into this 2020 decade. I have a lot of fun orchestrating rap station radio. It's internet radio. As a matter of fact, it's the internet work for rap music and hip hop. We have 10 station channels. You could get it free on your phones, and it's an app. We think is the groundbreaking app, because it highlights all the hip hop music, news, information on 10 station channels. But we have an all-woman station called She Radio. Because a lot of people just say, they like, oh man, well, you know, it's Nicki Minaj and then Cardi B. You know, I mean, there are more women doing rap music and hip hop and producing, making music, tracks, orchestrating than ever before. So we encompass that. We encompass hip hop gods, which is artists with 15-year careers, or International Planet Earth Planet Rap, which is everywhere else in the world. There are hip hop artists putting it down, man. Different languages, you know, especially super spitters that are able to two or three languages. Like the derogatory thing in this country, especially in this region, where people look down to our brown brothers and sisters because they can speak. No, really, they look at it because they can't speak English right or some sort of like. I said, they know 2 languages, maybe 3. Right. You know a half. Right. So we got, so it's about, the world is about what it's about. So we reflect the world in hip hop. Matter of fact, we also tell people, you send us your music, we'll put that in flotation too with evaluation. We evaluate it and treat it like NPR. So that's on one, and the other thing is it's called Rap Station. Just go to Rap Station 365, and just pull it down. It's on Google and also iTunes, and we ushered in that whole thing. So when people say they know about hip hop and rap music, I'm like, I've been doing a show for like 10 years in a row. It's on Pacifica stations. Rap Station is really the place to be. We serve also as a minor league operation for information for LL Cool J, Sirius XM, Rock the Bells. Okay. So we're totally into this like ESPN would be into basketball right now. So we've been doing, that's what I do. And the other thing is running the record label, and then the other thing is running my mouth. Right. So.
Thank you for doing all of that and doing some of it here. All right. We're going to close. One more round, everybody, for Chuck D. Thank you.
All right. So I think it's our new fad to run a little bit late at this festival, but it's all good because we're learning and we're creating together. So the next thing is there's a little bit there's a little bit of time for us to go outside to the resource table, but I actually want to direct everyone to our next steps, which are the Next Steps Policy Roundtables. We have 3, so please attend them. The first one is the role of arts and youth leadership in achieving justice in LA, led by Arts for Incarcerated Youth Network and the young people there, and Zoe Rawson. We have What's in a Name, Reimagining the Future of California's Arts and Corrections Program, led by Mariana Moscoso of the California Arts Council and Lamar Harrison. Raise your hand so people know to follow you if you want to go to that one. And Lemar, I'm so sorry. Patrick? Oh, Maverick. All right, Maverick Harrison. And then the legislative advocacy one led by Isaac Bryan in the back and Herman Gallardo. Please join them. And lunch is here if you want to grab your lunch and take it into the round table with you. Yes?